Hey everyone, and welcome to this explainer. I am absolutely thrilled to have you here today. We are going to be opening up what is basically an ancient, illuminated manuscript of human thought. We're diving into one of the most persistent, powerful, and honestly just fascinating concepts in the entire history of philosophy and religion, and that is dualism. We're going to trace this incredible journey of how humanity has basically divided the universe in two, starting from ancient campfires all the way up to the supercomputers sitting on our desks today.
So, let's just jump right into it. Think about the modern digital world for a second. Every single time you pick up your smartphone, you're interacting with a system built entirely on ones and zeros, right? On, off, true, false. But here's the really wild part. This digital binary architecture, it isn't actually a new invention. It's literally the ultimate technological expression of humanity's absolute oldest philosophical instinct. It's that primal urge we have to understand our incredibly complex universe by splitting it into two opposing or sometimes complementary forces.
To make this whole massive topic a bit easier to digest, we've broken it down into 6 main chapters. We'll cover the binary of being, creation myths and cosmic siblings, the great cosmic war, absolute versus mitigated dualism, the prison of matter, and finally, we'll wrap up with from spirit to silicon.
All right, Chapter 1, the binary of being.
We're starting out with what we call ontological dualism. Now, if you're a philosophy student, you probably know this term, but let's break it down simply. Ontological dualism is essentially the belief that reality is fundamentally structured into two distinct overarching categories. To make this super concrete, let's just use modern technology as an analogy. Your computer is made of hardware and software. Period. You literally cannot have a functioning computer without both of them, but they are entirely different categories of existence, right? Another perfect example is the ancient Chinese philosophy of Yin and Yang. This isn't some fierce battle where one tries to destroy the other. Instead, it's a constant cooperative feedback loop, active and passive, light and dark. They interact reciprocally to keep the whole system balanced.
Moving on to Chapter 2, creation myths and cosmic siblings.
Now, it's absolutely fascinating to look at how different cultures across the globe handle these dualistic origin stories. For instance, in the Siberian mythology of the Nenets people, and we actually see this similarly among the indigenous Fujian peoples of South America, we don't see some bloody epic war at the start of time. We see cosmic cooperation. In the Siberian tale, the entities Num and Nga collaborate, literally taking the form of diving waterfowl to build the land together. They have a shared goal. Then, if we look at modern religions like traditional Wicca, we see this really beautiful gender balance, a partnership between a moon goddess and a horned god. But, on the flip side, in ancient ditheism, not all cosmic siblings get along. You often have a creator god locked in a fierce absolute rivalry with a destroyer god.
And this highlights a really crucial distinction in our worldview. On one hand, we have bitheism, or cooperative dualism. Think yin and yang, homeostasis, a system where opposite poles actually work together to maintain existence. But over on the other side, we have ditheism, which is competitive dualism. This is pure rivalry. Imagine the changing of the seasons not just as weather, but as summer and winter locked in a literal, physical battle for supremacy over the earth. These are two totally different flavors of duality.
Which leads us to Chapter 3, the great cosmic war. So as human civilizations grew and got more complex, those cooperative myths we just talked about, well, they often escalated into all-out cosmic wars. This is what we call moral dualism. Now keep in mind, moral dualism doesn't necessarily mean there are multiple gods. It just means that there are two opposing moral realities, pure benevolence and absolute malevolence, and they are constantly clashing in the universe. It's the ultimate showdown of light versus dark.
Let's look at a quick timeline to see how this evolved historically. Way back in the 5th century BC, the Persian religion of Zoroastrianism gives us our first really explicit moral dualism. You have the creator, Ahura Mazda, fighting an absolute eternal struggle against the evil spirit, Angra Mainyu. Fast forward to the 3rd century AD, and Manichaeism pops up, painting this incredibly vivid picture of the realms of light and darkness literally colliding. And this idea just keeps going. By the 13th century in Europe, you have the Cathars. They were a Christian sect who believed the entire physical world was created by an evil god. Unsurprisingly, that belief got them targeted and essentially wiped out by the Inquisition.
Think about that Manichaean worldview for a second. It perfectly captures their view of the material world. For them, the universe isn't just a place we hang out. It's an extraction zone. The physical world is basically a giant machine designed to slowly sift out divine light that's gotten trapped in the evil darkness of matter and return it back to the heavens.
Chapter 4, Absolute versus Mitigated Dualism.
Okay,
let's put our Philosophy 101 hats back on for a minute, because we need to systematically break down these power dynamics. Not all dualisms are created equal. In absolute or radical dualism, the forces of good and evil are completely 100% equal. Imagine two rival CEOs with the exact same budget and the exact same market share, locked in an endless corporate war. Neither one can win. But in mitigated dualism, one force is ultimately way less powerful. It's more like having a supreme CEO who holds all the real power, but has to deal with this chaotic, rogue middle manager who's just messing things up on the factory floor. The middle manager is annoying, for sure, but their defeat is inevitable.
We can also see this in major world religions. Look at how Christianity and the Dvaita Vedanta school of Hinduism compare. In both of these, the creator and the creation remain fundamentally distinct. God isn't the universe, and the universe isn't God. They're deeply intertwined, obviously, but there is an ultimate ontological boundary keeping them separate as dependent realities.
Now for Chapter 5, the prison of matter. We're turning to a really deeply pessimistic but fascinating movement called Gnosticism. If you're into epic fantasy world building, you're going to love this. So the story starts in the pleroma, which is the perfect fullness of heaven. But then a divine being named Sophia has this unapproved desire for knowledge, and it accidentally causes a cosmic glitch. This births the Demiurge, an ignorant, blind craftsman who mistakenly thinks he's the true god. The Demiurge builds our physical universe as a literal cage ruled by these entities called archons who feed off our physical urges. And us, humans, in this story, we are divine sparks. We are literal pieces of the divine trapped inside biological cages, suffering from amnesia, and we need hidden knowledge, or gnosis, just to escape.
But to be fair, Gnosticism wasn't the only ancient mystical game in town. Let's compare it to Hermeticism. While the Gnostics looked at the body as this grotesque prison cell and demanded strict asceticism to escape it, the Hermeticists looked at the exact same universe and saw something beautiful. Hermeticism is super optimistic. They taught that humanity just fell in love with nature. The physical world isn't a prison, it's a sacred, divine laboratory for spiritual growth.
Finally, Chapter 6, From Spirit to Silicon. So, how do all these ancient myths about trapped spirits and rogue middle manager gods translate to our modern tech era? Well, surprisingly perfectly. We start with the Gnostic idea of spirit trapped in flesh. Then, in the 17th century, René Descartes gives us Cartesian dualism. He argued that the mind is entirely separate from the mechanical body, even suggesting the material world might just be a hoax run by a demon. Sounds a little like the Demiurge, doesn't it? Now, bring that right up to today with transhumanism in Silicon Valley. A lot of AI pioneers literally view human consciousness as pure software, and the biological body is just messy, outdated hardware that we eventually need to escape. The ancient urge to separate the pure mind from the messy physical body hasn't gone anywhere. We've just swapped out theology for technology. Man, we have covered a massive amount of philosophical ground today. Before we wrap up, let's just quickly lock these definitions into your memory with a brief summary list. We've got ontological dualism, those categorical splits like yin and yang. We've got moral dualism, the classic battle of good versus evil. Diatheism, where deities literally fight for control. The academic split between absolute and mitigated dualism. Equal powers versus a supreme and a lesser force. And finally, that tragic Gnostic vision of matter as a flawed prison.
And that brings us to the end of our explainer today. As we keep blurring the lines between software and reality, it leaves us with one seriously provocative thought to ponder. When we stare into our screens, interacting with that binary code, are we just looking at the newest version of humanity's oldest story? Are we simply living out the ancient Gnostic myth, divine sparks trapped in a digital age? Thank you so much for joining me to explore this. Keep questioning, keep learning, and I'll catch you in the next explainer.